the fire that forged a community. The Texas sun beat down on the rolling hills of Willow Creek, where the Clayton family ranch sprawled across 24 acres of rugged beauty. At 35, Michael Clayton never imagined he'd trade his Silicon Valley cubicle for dusty boots and barbed wire. But when the tech bubble burst, leaving him jobless, he returned to the land his family had owned for generations. The ranch was more than dirt, and grass. It was a legacy, etched into the stories his grandfather, Hank Clayton, told by the fireplace. Hank, a 78-year-old retired firefighter, was the kind of man who could stare down a tornado and make it blink. With a weathered face and eyes as sharp as a hawk's, he'd been running the ranch since Michael's father passed 3 years ago. Michael, still adjusting to the rhythm of ranch life, found solace in the land's quiet strength. He mended fences, leased patches to hunters, and learned the names of local suppliers. For a moment, life felt right. Then the letters arrived. The first one, stamped with the seal of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association, landed in the mailbox like a declaration of war. Violation notice: excessive vegetation growth. Fire hazard. Michael chuckled, tossing it aside. The Clayton Ranch wasn't part of Pine Ridge, the upscale neighborhood bordering their eastern fence. But the notices kept coming: improper waste disposal, unauthorized structures, aesthetic violations. Each one was more absurd than the last. "Ignore him," Hank grunted one morning, his coffee cup trembling in his grip as he stared out the kitchen window. Michael followed his gaze to a black object bolted to an oak tree along their fence line. A security camera, its lens trained on their barn, glinted in the dawn light. It hadn't been there yesterday. "Those Pine Ridge vultures," Hank muttered, his voice low with a fury Michael rarely heard. "They pulled this nonsense on your grandma years ago, harassing her about our cattle while I was on duty. Stressed her to the breaking point. I swore on her grave I'd never let them touch our land." Michael checked the ranch's security footage and found the culprit: Victor Malone, Pine Ridge's security chief. A disgraced ex-cop fired for misconduct, Victor now worked for a private firm hired by the HOA. The footage showed him sneaking onto their property at 3 a.m., ladder in hand, installing cameras under the guise of fire hazard monitoring during the drought season. But Michael and Hank knew better. This was surveillance. Harassment. That afternoon, Michael met with Sarah Daniels, an old college friend turned environmental lawyer. Over coffee in town, she reviewed the notices and footage. "They're building a case, Michael," she warned, her brow furrowed. "They're documenting violations to fine you into bankruptcy and force you to sell." She slid her tablet across the table, revealing Pine Ridge's expansion plan: a golf course and shopping complex that swallowed the Clayton Ranch as if it were already theirs. Michael's stomach churned. The HOA's president, Margaret Ellison, had been eyeing their land for years. This wasn't just about rules, it was a land grab. Back at the ranch, trouble escalated. A white SUV with Pine Ridge security emblazoned on the side parked 3 feet onto their property. Victor sat inside, snapping photos of the ranch house with a telephoto lens. Hank, unfazed, hammered a no trespassing sign into the ground, blocking Victor's view. "You're on private property," Michael called out. "Move your vehicle." Victor smirked, adjusting his sunglasses. "Just monitoring fire hazards, kid. Public safety concern." He tapped his walkie-talkie. "Don't make me call this in." Hank stepped forward, holding a folded survey from 1928. "Call whoever you want, but you're 20 feet inside our boundary." Victor's smirk faded, but he backed up only to the fence line, not beyond it. That evening, their neighbor, Evelyn Harper, hurried over. "Margaret's on a power trip," she whispered. "She's jacking up our HOA fees to fund more security and fining anyone who complains. She's got the city council in her pocket, too." As night fell, their dog, Scout, barked frantically. Michael rushed outside, catching a figure darting from the barn. The cameras confirmed it. Victor again, planting listening devices near their shed. Hank slammed his fist on the table when Michael showed him the footage. "Your grandma warned me they'd try this again. They don't know who they're messing with." Hank pulled out a leather journal, its pages filled with his late wife's precise handwriting property maps, legal notes, and a plan. "We're not just defending our land, Michael," he said, his eyes glinting. "We're teaching them a lesson they'll never forget." The next morning, Hank was on the phone with Tom Bradley, a retired cop and old friend. "They're escalating," Hank said. We need to be ready. Sarah arrived with legal documents, confirming the ranch was outside Pine Ridge's jurisdiction. But she had bad news. Margaret had ties to City Council President Charles Whitaker, who was pushing to rezone their area for commercial development. As they strategized, Scout barked again. Victor's SUV blocked a delivery truck bringing horse feed. The driver apologized, saying Victor demanded environmental clearance. Victor stood smugly, his hand near a holster. New city ordinance, he lied. All deliveries need clearance. Michael's blood boiled, but Hank intervened, holding an ancient survey map. Call the real police, Michael. This man is trespassing and impersonating an officer. Victor's face reddened. I'm authorized security, old man. Hank didn't flinch. You're 20 feet inside our property, son. Move, or the sheriff tows your vehicle. Victor retreated, but not before snarling. This isn't over, Claytons. That afternoon, Michael and Sarah attended a Pine Ridge HOA meeting. Margaret, her silver hair perfectly styled, addressed the crowd with a PowerPoint of unflattering ranch photos. The Clayton property's overgrown vegetation threatens our community, she claimed. Michael stood. That's false. Our ranch meets county fire safety standards, and you have no jurisdiction over us. The room fell silent. Margaret's smile tightened. This is a private meeting, Mr. Clayton. He held up a notice. Your bylaws say it's public when it affects non-HOA property. Evelyn stood beside him. The Claytons have maintained that ranch for decades. This is about your development plans, not safety. Margaret's eyes flashed. Evelyn, focus on your non-compliant roof color. The threat was clear, but several homeowners approached Michael afterward, whispering their frustrations with Margaret's iron grip. Back at the ranch, Victor's SUV blocked their access road. Michael called the sheriff while Hank staked out the property line, proving Victor was trespassing. When the deputy arrived, Victor claimed harassment, but Hank's 1920s survey and footage shut him down. Move it, or it's towed, the deputy ordered. Victor glared. My boss won't like this. Neither will the council. As he drove off, Hank turned to Michael. He'll be back with reinforcements. Time to call Tom. We're preparing our defense. The Texas sky burned orange as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the Clayton ranch. Michael sat at the kitchen table, poring over property documents, while Hank spread out a map marked with red ink. Did you know our land has special dispensation for controlled burns? Hank asked, his voice steady but laced with mischief. A privilege from my firefighting days. Michael looked up, intrigued. No, I didn't. Hank's eyes gleamed. Well, we do. And it's about time we used it. The next morning, a certified letter arrived from a law firm representing Pine Ridge. They were suing the Claytons for maintaining a public hazard and demanding compliance with HOA fire safety standards. Michael's heart sank, but Sarah, reviewing the documents, shook her head. This is nonsense. They're citing ordinances that don't apply to your property. They're betting you'll run out of money or patience fighting this. She drafted a response, demanding that Pine Ridge cease harassment and threatening a countersuit for trespassing and intimidation. Meanwhile, Hank met with Tom Bradley in the barn, upgrading their security system with infrared cameras to catch nighttime intruders. Tom handed Michael a folder. I looked into Victor Malone, fired from the Willow Creek PD 3 years ago for evidence tampering and excessive force. Multiple harassment complaints, especially against property owners resisting developers. Michael flipped through the documents, his jaw tightening. And get this, Tom added. Charles Whitaker was on the review board that could have pressed charges, but let Victor walk with just determination. No criminal record. So they've worked together before, Michael said, a chill settling in his gut. Tom nodded. This isn't just an overzealous HOA. There's big money behind it. Margaret Ellison's tied to Willow Creek Luxury Developments. The company's set to build on your land if they get it. That afternoon, Michael's bank called. We're reviewing your mortgage due to concerns about property value, the loan officer said, citing fire hazard reports and potential rezoning. The timing was too convenient. Michael hung up, furious, and found Hank peering through binoculars at a car parked on the public road. A man inside was photographing the ranch with a telephoto lens, not Victor, likely an inspector hired to fabricate violations. That evening, Michael and Hank attended a city council meeting where Charles Whitaker presided. The agenda included fire safety measures in drought-affected areas bordering residential developments, a clear jab at their ranch. During public comments, Michael stood. This is about forcing us to sell to developers. We have proof of HOA trespassing, illegal surveillance, and supplier harassment. Charles cut him off. This isn't a forum for personal grievances. Murmurs of disagreement rippled through the crowd. Hank stood, unfolding his property maps. I've lived here 50 years, served as a firefighter for 30. I know when fire safety's being used as a land grab excuse. He held up certified documents. Our ranch meets all county fire safety standards. We owe nothing to Pine Ridge. Charles tried to interrupt, but Hank's voice rose. Fire tests gold. I use fire to test HOA law. The audience gasped, some stifling laughter. Charles banged his gavel. That sounds like a threat, Mr. Clayton. Hank smiled calmly. Just a reminder, I know fire codes better than anyone here. As they left, Margaret intercepted them in the parking lot, Victor at her side. You're making a mistake, she hissed, jabbing a finger at Michael. We'll offer a generous price, well above market value. The ranch isn't for sale, Michael said firmly. Margaret's smile turned icy. Everything has a price. Holding out will get expensive. Victor smirked, his hand on his holster. Accidents happen on old ranches, especially in drought season. Hank stepped forward. Threatening a former fire chief about arson is a federal offense, son. Victor's smirk faded, and they retreated. But trouble followed. Back at the ranch, the front gate was spray-painted with fire hazard in red. Scout led them to a man claiming to be from the Environmental Protection Department, trying to access their shed. His ID looked fake, and when Tom confronted him, he fled. Michael's patience snapped. Maybe we should sell, Hank. This is getting dangerous. Hank's face hardened. Is that what your father would do? Or your grandmother? She fought for this land until her last breath. The next morning, Michael apologized over breakfast. You're right. I was wrong to suggest giving up. Hank nodded, spreading out a detailed ranch map. There's something you need to know. When I was with the fire department, I secured a permit for controlled burns due to our high fire risk zone. He showed Michael an official document with county seals. It's still valid and overrides HOA rules or city ordinances. Michael's eyes widened. So we can legally burn on our land? Exactly, Hank said, a smile creeping across his face. As long as we follow safety protocols and notify the fire department. Sarah arrived with more dirt on Margaret. She was linked to a real estate fraud case in her last town. Nothing stuck, but suspicious. And Willow Creek Luxury Developments has pre-sold golf club memberships for a resort partly on your land. If they don't get it, they're in deep with wealthy clients. Tom showed them security footage of Victor flicking cigarette butts into dry grass near their fence, twice sparking small fires they'd extinguished. He's either reckless or trying to burn you out, Tom said grimly. Hank's expression darkened. We act before this idiot burns the county down. He outlined a plan for a controlled burn to clear dry brush along their eastern boundary, where Victor parked his SUV. Michael hesitated. Isn't this risky? I fought fires for 30 years, Hank said. I know how to control them. If we don't reduce this fuel load, we're at risk from fools like Victor. Sarah confirmed the permit's legality. If Victor's trespassing during your burn, that's his problem, not yours. They prepared all day. Hank notified the fire department of a burn the next day, marked fire breaks, and checked wind patterns. Michael cleared space around structures and filled water tanks. Tom monitored cameras, watching Victor's movements. That evening, an alert pinged. Victor's SUV was parked on their land, several feet inside the boundary. He reclined in his seat, feet on the dashboard, dozing off. Hank checked his weather app, winds from the west, low humidity, dropping temperature. Perfect for a small burn. He looked at Michael. The permit allows a 24-hour window if conditions are optimal. Should we move it up? Michael glanced at Victor, asleep in the burn zone. The irony was delicious, but caution nagged him. Is it safe? What if he panics? Tom held up a fire department radio. I've alerted my old colleagues that we might start tonight. They're on standby, and Hank's fire brakes are solid. Victor's vehicle will be surrounded, but never in danger. Sarah nodded. It's legal. Your permit allows timing flexibility. Michael looked at the trio, then back at Victor, who'd harassed them for weeks, endangering their land with his carelessness. Let's do it, he said. Hank grinned, holding up a lighter to the camera. This is the emergency switch for our legal memory. The pre-dawn air hung cool and still over the Clayton Ranch, the kind of quiet that carried the weight of anticipation. Michael, Hank, and Tom suited up in fire-resistant gear, their faces set with determination. The plan was simple but daring. A controlled burn to clear dry brush along the eastern boundary, where Victor Malone's SUV sat parked, several feet onto their property. Through the security feed, Michael saw Victor still asleep, oblivious to the storm about to break. Hank handed Michael a drip torch, his voice steady. "We're following every protocol. This is a legitimate fire prevention measure for drought conditions." Tom's radio crackled as he confirmed the start time with the fire department. "They've got a truck on standby." Hank's plan is textbook. They began at the downwind edge, igniting small patches of grass. Flames flickered to life, sending up thin plumes of smoke in the gray light. Working in sync, they created a horseshoe pattern, carefully encircling Victor's vehicle while leaving a clear exit path to the public road. Michael's heart pounded, but Hank's decades of experience kept the operation precise. The fire stayed low, consuming only the dry undergrowth as planned. Sarah arrived as the sky began to lighten, carrying a clipboard with permits and documentation. She surveyed the burn with a nod. "Textbook execution. I've got last month's fire department inspection certificate, confirming your property's safety standards." The flames danced under Hank's watchful eye, never straying beyond the fire breaks. Michael held a hose, ready to douse any rogue sparks, while Tom monitored the cameras. As the sun crested the horizon, a shout erupted from Victor's SUV. He'd woken to find his vehicle ringed by controlled flames, the only escape route leading off Clayton Land. Through binoculars, Michael saw Victor's panicked face as he fumbled his phone, nearly dropping it. "Right on schedule," Hank murmured, checking his watch. "Fire department's due in 3, 2, 1. A red fire truck pulled up on the main road, responding to both their notification and, no doubt, Victor's frantic call. Two firefighters approached, one carrying a clipboard. "Morning, Hank," the older one said. "Clean burn you've got. Mind if we see your permits?" Hank and Sarah handed over the paperwork, while Michael kept an eye on Victor. He was gesturing wildly on his phone, his face red with rage. Moments later, a black SUV screeched to a stop behind the fire truck. Margaret Ellison emerged, her silver hair slightly askew, her composure cracking. She marched toward them, Victor scrambling to follow after hastily backing his vehicle out of the burn zone. "What the hell are you doing?" Margaret demanded, her voice shrill. "You could have killed him. This is attempted murder." Sarah stepped forward, handing over copies of the permits. "This is a legally permitted controlled burn on private property, Ms. Ellison. All authorities were notified, and all protocols followed. Your employee was trespassing during a sanctioned operation." Margaret snatched the papers, scanning them for flaws. Finding none, she turned to the firefighters. "They set a fire around an occupied vehicle. Do something." The senior firefighter looked up, unfazed. "The Claytons have proper permits, ma'am. The fire's controlled, with safety measures in place. If your employee was on their property without permission, that's a sheriff's issue." Victor stepped forward, his hand hovering near his holster. "This was deliberate intimidation. They knew I was there." Tom chose that moment to intervene, his old police badge glinting on his belt. "We have footage of you trespassing and falling asleep on duty. Plus, multiple instances of you tossing lit cigarettes into dry grass, creating real fire hazards. Want me to share that with the fire marshal?" Victor paled, his hand dropping. Margaret's fury boiled over. "This isn't over, Claytons. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have connections you can't imagine." Hank, smudged with soot but calm, walked over. "I've lived here 50 years, young lady. I've pulled people from burning buildings, saved their homes, their lives. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, people who think money trumps the law." He gestured to the smoldering ground. "Fire at the right place, right time. The game's just beginning." Margaret's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, Victor noticed Hank's satisfied smile and drew his gun, pointing it at him. "You think this is funny?" he snarled. Scout bounded from behind the barn, barking furiously. He didn't attack, but the sudden movement startled Victor, who slipped on the muddy ground where they'd sprayed water for safety. He fell face first into a puddle of soot, his gun flying from his hand. Tom swiftly retrieved it. The firefighters radioed for sheriff's deputies. Brandishing a weapon during an emergency operation, the senior firefighter said grimly. That's serious. Margaret's rage hit new heights as Victor picked himself up, mud dripping from his uniform. You'll pay for this, she hissed. Nobody defeats me in Willow Creek. Hank watched them retreat, serene. I've faced 4 alarm fires with people trapped inside. You folks, just summer mosquitoes. The story of the burn spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Videos captured by onlookers showed Victor's SUV ringed by flames, followed by his muddy tumble, adding a humiliating twist. While some Pine Ridge residents stayed loyal to Margaret, others began questioning her leadership. Evelyn Harper hosted a meeting at her home, where homeowners shared tales of excessive fines and intimidation. Michael and Sarah attended, explaining HOA members' rights. You can call for a special election to remove board members, Sarah told the group. Your bylaws allow it with enough signatures. But Margaret fought back. Through Charles Whitaker, she pushed an emergency city council vote to annex the Clayton Ranch into city limits, subjecting it to new regulations and potential eminent domain. Hank countered by rallying his network of friends and former colleagues. Letters and calls flooded the council, and a petition against annexation gained hundreds of signatures. Tom uncovered more dirt. An independent assessment company, owned by Charles's brother-in-law, was hired to declare the ranch a fire risk requiring city oversight. The conflict of interest was blatant. Meanwhile, Michael's bank account was frozen over incomplete environmental disclosures, and suppliers faced pressure to avoid the ranch. Victor, though subdued after the gun incident, impersonated a police officer to intimidate hunters leasing their land. Yet the community rallied. Neighbors shared supplies, farmers brought hay, and Pine Ridge residents formed a Citizens for Fairness committee to challenge Margaret. What began as harassment against one family grew into a movement against corruption. The night before the annexation vote, Hank revealed he'd been feeding information to a county newspaper journalist. They're preparing an expose on Margaret, Charles, and Willow Creek luxury developments, he said, showing Michael emails. He opened his wife's journal to a new page. And here's our ace. According to 1920 surveys, 5 acres of Pine Ridge, including their clubhouse, belong to us. Your grandma found this years ago, but held off while sick. She left it for us to use if they came after our land again. The Willow Creek City Council chamber buzzed with tension, packed to the brim with residents, reporters, and curious onlookers. The annexation vote loomed, a thinly veiled attempt to seize the Clayton Ranch for Margaret Ellison's development dreams. Michael Clayton stood near the back, his pulse racing, while Hank clutched a folder of documents, his weathered face unreadable. The air felt electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Charles Whitaker, the council president, called the meeting to order, his discomfort palpable. His eyes darted across the room, avoiding the crowd's scrutiny. Due to urgent fire safety concerns, he began, his voice clipped. We propose annexing the Clayton property into city limits for proper oversight. Hands shot up before he could finish. Reluctantly, he recognized Evelyn Harper, who stood with a stack of papers. Mr. Whitaker, I have reports from 3 independent fire safety experts confirming that the Clayton Ranch exceeds county regulations. I move to table this proposal for further review. Charles tried to overrule her, but the audience's murmurs grew into a roar. Forced to allow a vote, he watched in shock as 2 council members sided with Evelyn, stalling the annexation. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Charles scrambled to regain control, banging his gavel. Next agenda item. Hank seized the moment, striding to the podium. Before we move on, I have relevant information. Charles protested, but Hank cut him off, citing the city charter's allowance for citizens to present evidence before property votes. He distributed copies of the 1920s boundary surveys to the council. These certified records prove 5 acres of Pine Ridge, including their clubhouse, were mistakenly built on Clayton land. The room exploded in whispers and gasps. A reporter with a press badge, who'd slipped in earlier, stood. Mr. Whitaker, care to comment on documents showing you knew about this boundary dispute when approving Pine Ridge's permits? Or your financial ties to Willow Creek luxury developments, set to build on the Clayton land if annexed? Charles's face drained of color. This is a witch hunt, he stammered. The reporter pressed on, citing evidence of kickbacks. Chaos ensued as audience members shouted for answers, and reporters fired questions. In the confusion, Margaret slipped out a side door, her face a mask of fury. Charles called a recess and fled the room. Evelyn approached Michael and Hank, beaming. That was brilliant. But Margaret won't quit. She's already on her phone, pulling strings. Her words proved prophetic. As they left, Margaret waited in the parking lot, her voice venomous. You've embarrassed me publicly. That was a mistake. I won't stop until I get that land. Hank faced her, unflinching. I fought fires while bank robbers held guns to my head. You're just summer mosquitoes, and I've got one arrow left. Margaret's eyes narrowed, but she stormed off without another word. The next morning, Michael's mortgage company called, citing environmental hazards and threatening to review his loan. It was Margaret's doing, leveraging her banking connections. Michael relayed the news to Hank, who nodded grimly. Time for the final arrow. Let's end this. That evening, the Pine Ridge clubhouse overflowed with residents for an emergency HOA meeting. Margaret stood at the podium, exuding confidence despite recent setbacks. We've secured new financing for the Willow Creek Luxury Resorts project, she announced, clicking to a slide of a sprawling golf course and mall. This will boost your property values by 30%. The crowd murmured, some swayed by the promise of profit. Margaret's smile widened as she detailed golf club memberships and luxury amenities. But as she transitioned to a slide about pricing tiers, the double doors swung open. Hank led the charge, followed by Michael, Sarah Daniels, Tom Bradley, and 20 Pine Ridge residents, with Evelyn at the forefront. 2 sheriff's deputies and the investigative reporter trailed behind. Margaret's smile faltered. This is a private meeting for residents only. Security, escort them out. No one moved. Evelyn stepped forward. As HOA members, we've invited these guests to address community matters, per bylaws, Section 7, Paragraph 3. Before Margaret could object, Michael took the podium, carrying a large survey map and legal documents. What Ms. Ellison hasn't told you is that this clubhouse stands on land legally owned by the Clayton family. He unrolled the map, hanging it beside Margaret's renderings. According to 1920 surveys, confirmed by 3 independent surveyors this week, 5 acres of Pine Ridge, including this building, were included due to a boundary error. The room fell silent. My grandmother discovered this years ago and documented it in her journal, authenticated by experts. She left it for us to protect our ranch. Sarah distributed legal verifications to the board. Margaret sputtered. This is preposterous. These could be forged a desperate attempt to block progress. The reporter stepped forward, recorder in hand. Ms. Ellison, care to comment on evidence you and Whitaker knew about this boundary dispute before Pine Ridge's permits? Or that you've pre-sold golf club memberships on land you don't own? Margaret's face flushed. This is a witch hunt. I've only tried to improve this community while the Claytons cling to their outdated ranch, blocking everyone's future. In her rage, she slipped. Of course, I knew about the boundary issue. Everyone did during the original development. But after 50 years, possession is 9/10 of the law. Gasps echoed as residents realized her admission. A deputy stepped forward. Ms. Ellison, we'd like you to come to the station for questioning. Another deputy blocked Charles Whitaker, who tried to slip out. Mr. Whitaker, we have questions for you about ethics violations. Victor Malone burst in, furious. This is a setup, he shouted, pointing at Michael and Hank. He reached for his holster, but it was empty, still under investigation for brandishing his gun. Tom produced a recording device. Mr. Malone, we have you on tape planning to plant illegal substances on the Clayton property. Care to explain to the officers? The meeting dissolved into chaos. Residents demanded answers from the stunned board. Evelyn seized the moment, calling for a no-confidence vote in the HOA leadership and an interim board until elections. The motion passed overwhelmingly, with only Margaret's loyalists dissenting. As the crowd dispersed, residents approached the Claytons with apologies and congratulations. Michael assured them they wouldn't evict anyone or claim homes. We just want correct boundaries and no more harassment. Evelyn, elected interim president, pledged to work with them for a fair resolution. The fallout from the Pine Ridge HOA meeting rippled through Willow Creek like a stone dropped in a still pond. Margaret Ellison and Charles Whitaker faced investigations for fraud, ethics violations, and abuse of power. Victor Malone was arrested for conspiracy to plant evidence and impersonating a police officer, his once smug demeanor replaced by handcuffs and a scowl. The county newspaper published a scathing exposé, detailing their scheme kickbacks from Willow Creek luxury developments, systematic intimidation, and a web of corruption that ensnared city officials and private firms alike. Michael Clayton stood on the porch of the family ranch, the morning sun casting a golden glow over the hills. The weight of the past months, threats, trespassing, and legal battles seemed to lift with the breeze. His bank, after a groveling apology for the misunderstanding, restored his account to good standing. Suppliers resumed deliveries, and hunters returned to lease the land without harassment. The ranch was safe, but the victory was more than personal. Hank Clayton, ever the strategist, had turned the reclaimed 5 acres into a symbol of reconciliation. After discussions with Evelyn Harper and the new HOA board, they agreed to transform part of the land into a community park. It would serve as a buffer between the ranch and Pine Ridge, a shared space to heal old wounds. Michael marveled at Hank's foresight. "You didn't just save our land," he told his grandfather. "You changed the town." The grand opening of Clayton Community Park came a year later, on a crisp spring day. Families from Pine Ridge and Willow Creek gathered on the green, where children laughed on new playground equipment and neighbors shared picnic baskets. A small pond, fed by a stream Michael had helped dig, sparkled under the sun. Evelyn, now the permanent HOA president, took the stage for a speech. "The Claytons could have demanded we tear down our clubhouse and homes," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Instead, they chose to work with us, turning conflict into something beautiful. That's what community means." Applause erupted, and Michael felt a lump in his throat. He caught Hank's eye, the old firefighter tossing a ball for Scout near the pond. Hank walked over, his face creased in a rare, unguarded smile. "Your grandma would be proud," he said, clapping Michael's shoulder. "She always said you protect what's yours by burning the underbrush. Clears the way for new growth." Michael nodded, watching Pine Ridge residents chat with long-time ranching neighbors. The park was more than grass, and Swingsit was proof that standing firm could forge something better. The controlled burn that had surrounded Victor's SUV hadn't just humiliated a bully. It had exposed a corrupt system, rallied a community, and rewritten Willow Creek's future. Hank's words from that fiery morning echoed in Michael's mind. A small fire can prevent a bigger one. As a firefighter, Hank had learned to harness flames to save lives. As a rancher, he'd used that same principle to save their legacy. The law, he'd said, was meant to protect people, not to be weaponized by those chasing power. Without Hank's knowledge of fire codes, boundary laws, and sheer stubbornness, they might have lost everything. Michael walked the park's paths, greeting familiar faces. Dorothy, a Pine Ridge resident who'd once sided with Margaret, approached him. "I was wrong about you folks," she admitted. "I thought the HOA was protecting us. Turns out, they were the threat." Michael smiled, accepting her handshake. "We all got fooled at some point. What matters is we're here now." The day wound down with a barbecue, the scent of grilled brisket mingling with laughter. Michael sat with Sarah and Tom, reflecting on the journey. "You know," Sarah said, sipping lemonade, "this started with a camera on your tree and ended with a park. That's not just a win, it's a story people will tell for years." Tom chuckled. "And Victor's mud bath? That's the part they'll never forget." They laughed, but Michael's thoughts turned serious. The battle had exposed how far some would go: threats, guns, financial sabotage for greed. It wasn't just about land. It was about power and the courage to stand against it. As the sun set, painting the sky the same fiery orange as the controlled burn that started it all, Michael realized the true weapon wasn't the fire or the lawsuits. It was knowing their rights and refusing to back down. The Clayton Ranch stood not just as a family legacy, but as a testament to what happens when ordinary people fight back with grit and truth. The park's opening marked a new chapter for Willow Creek. Pine Ridge's new leadership, under Evelyn, revised the bylaws to prevent future abuses. The city council, shaken by Whitaker's disgrace, passed transparency measures. And the ranch, once a target, became a symbol of resilience, its fences standing tall against the horizon. Michael joined Hank by the pond, Scout panting at their feet. "You think they'll try again?" he asked, half joking. Hank's eyes twinkled. "Let 'em. We've got more arrows." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that comes from surviving a storm together. The ranch was theirs, the community stronger, and the future bright. This story of the Clayton family is a reminder that injustice thrives in silence, but courage and knowledge can burn it away. Have you ever faced a bully like Margaret, or a system that tried to take what's yours? Maybe it was an HOA, a workplace, or a neighbor. How did you fight back or wish you had? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about standing up to abuse and violence in our lives. What's your stance? Your voice matters, and I'd love to hear it.